Well, welcome to a very special Federalist Radio Hour. I am Mollie Hemingway, senior editor at the Federalist, and I'm very excited to have the guest David Harsanyi of National Review. I don't know your title there. What is it?
Senior writer.
Senior writer at National Review. And it is great to see you today, David. I hope everything is going well.
Everything is going great, and it's great to see you too. This is very
So,
exciting.
I know. So today's big news is that Sudan has signed a peace agreement with Israel, brokered by the United States. What do you think of this latest peace deal that is happening in the Middle East?
Well, I think it's amazing. I mean, I follow this issue closely. When I was younger, lived in Israel for a bit, and the idea that these countries would ever strike peace agreements of any sort with Israel is just amazing. But taking it out of just Sudan, but looking at it just as a whole, I think someone, or maybe the president himself, mentioned that even Saudi Arabia was interested in doing the same very soon. And obviously, Israel and Saudi Arabia have had closer ties in recent years. Is just mind-boggling. I mean, the Saudis were for a long time one of the key funders of terrorism against not just Israel, but Jews around the world, frankly, and radicalism. And to think that this could all, end up with just peace deals all around is amazing. And obviously, the Obama administration deserves some credit for bringing everyone together with their Iran policy. But still, the administration, if Obama had done this, he would certainly have won another Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, being that he got one in anticipation of all the great things he would do, I certainly think that if he had actually done something, he would have gotten more. But I also thought it was interesting that Sudan is where the Arab League met in 1967, where they formed their Israel has no right to exist policy, where they said that there would be no peace with Israel. And this is quite the change from, I know it seems like a long time ago, 1967, but it's kind of a beautiful thing that in such short order you can have multiple countries moving away from that posture. And I do think it's interesting that the Trump administration, I remember we had some meetings with some Trump administration officials on the issue of how they were trying to broker Middle East peace. I think I speak for both of us. When we came out of those meetings, we were like, never going to happen, right? Or is that saying too much?
No, we were in there and we came out and we're like, they're insane. This is just nonsense.
That's really sweet.
I think that was off the record, but these weren't just like some low-level people speaking. These were high-level folks. We were like, they're nuts. But I'm happy you mentioned the Khartoum resolution, which was no peace, no recognition of Israel, and I forgot the third one was, I have it here, no negotiations, right? I mean, that essentially set the tone after the 67 war, in which Arab countries basically built their foreign policy in connection to Israel around the Palestinian grievances. And that has been the way that America and the United States, especially under Obama, has approached it. Even, frankly, George Bush and Carter and Reagan. So this changed that whole dynamic.
So I do like that the Trump administration went to the Palestinians first. And what I think made them different from previous administrations is they went to the Palestinians first. They put forth this deal that they thought was really good. The Palestinians said, absolutely not. And then they just kept going. They didn't. There's no room to have any peace here between these various countries because the Palestinians said no. And so being able to have that approach of going to the Palestinians and then not making their no be the end of the whole operation was important. I also think you alluded to the Obama administration uniting everybody with their Iran policy. And it really did show people, like, if our options are to either be subject to Iran being the country that controls the entire region, or having peace break out elsewhere. That was another big difference between the Trump administration and its predecessor. But also, I think saying we want these countries to handle their peace themselves and be invested in it themselves, rather than have the U.S. have this constant heavy military footprint in the region. It's not like U.S. is not playing a role. Obviously, they are, but it's more about getting buy-in from the countries to manage their own annual, affairs.
That's a good point. Even the famous Egyptian-Israeli peace agreement had very little to do with America, really. I mean, Carter came in at the last moment, and obviously he bribed Egypt to do it in a way, but they had approached each other beforehand. And I suspect that there were similar things going on here. Not so sure about Sudan, but perhaps the other countries. And part of it is also that the Palestinians have demands that cannot be met. And I think that the Arab countries are realizing that it's just useless to constantly hold up progress because they, demand a right of return or whatever they're demanding today. And every time they sign an agreement, it falls apart because they never hold up their side of it. So, basing Israel is a powerful and rich country in that region. And why shouldn't these other nations want to do business with them? There really is no reason other than the Palestinian issue that holds that back in any real way. And now I think those countries have gotten sick of Palestinian demands and they want to move on.
So this is somewhat related. I had written a piece this week about how the Trump administration's best accomplishments were what they haven't done. And partly it was related to not seizing greater executive authority by using the coronavirus excuse that like many state governors or other foreign officials are. But my particular thing I appreciate is not having a new invasion or war under the first term's belt. And this might seem like a very low bar, but it is a bar that many of the predecessors have not been able to meet. What do you think about the fact that the Trump administration has not, as of yet, invaded a country or started a war? Are you for this or against this? You're more pro-war than I am, so you might.
There's still some time to get this done. There's a couple of weeks. I would say that the best thing the Trump administration has done in my book are judges, and especially the Supreme Court. And the second best thing they've done is foreign policy. And among those things, it's how it's dealt with Iran and Israel in the Middle East. And the second thing is upsetting Germans and French and Danes and people in Luxembourg, Luxemburgians.
They're the worst.
Yeah, they are the worst. But, the funny thing is yesterday during the debate, Biden, as he's done many times, mentions how we've totally abandoned our allies. They never consider Israel an ally. I mean, they never even speak about it, whereas it used to be sort of one of the foundational foreign policy positions of the Democratic Party. I mean, Bill Clinton said he would grab a rifle and go defend Israel if he had to, and now they don't even mention it. They don't even consider Israel an ally. And I think they're our best allies, certainly better than most of our European allies. So, yeah, I agree with that. I don't really agree with your executive power thing, because I mean, Trump has used that in ways that I don't like. Now, certainly nothing near what Obama has done, but he has occasionally.
What do you think he's done in dealing with coronavirus that seized greater authority for him?
Well, he did sign that. I have to think about it a little bit, but I do remember offhand that he signed that CDC thing on leases and paying rent or something. I forget what the specifics were, but I'm not comparing him to Obama. But I think that, and I don't really actually think there were no teeth in that executive order, but I still don't like the idea that presidents feel that they can just do something like that, if it makes sense.
Great. Okay. So the debate, you mentioned the debate. What did you think about last night's debate?
Usually I fall on the wrong side of polling with the debate, so I'm never very sure. But I thought that Trump actually it might have been his best debate ever, right? I thought that he had let Biden speak and then sort of started to debunk what he said. And Biden, this idea that Biden doesn't, lies less than Trump makes me laugh. I mean, there literally wasn't a major issue that he didn't just completely lie about. He even dusted off that lie about Barack Obama and about Obamacare and no one losing their health care. I couldn't even believe that. But just generally, I thought Trump did a good job. I think, I don't think he explained the Hunter email story very well, and maybe it's a little complicated to explain in a debate. But generally, I thought he did pretty well. How about you?
Well, I also have very different views than most people. Like, I didn't actually dislike the first debate. I kind of enjoy watching two people go after each other. I recognize that many Americans disagree with me. And so on that note, I would just say tonally, Donald Trump came out just chill. He came out like he came out in that Guthrie, whatever her name is. That debate, he was just very cool, calm, in control, a very big difference from the first debate. And he had some pretty good parries. when people say this is the best debate he's ever had, and I've heard a lot of people say that, I'm like, do you not remember how amazing all of the 2016 debates were, whether they were the Republican primary debates or the ones against Hillary? Like, they made a play about his debates with Hillary, which were the kind of thing where you just shouted, people were shouting on either side. Those were fun debates. This was
Listen, entertainment value. This was not the best debate, right?
okay.
I mean, these debates were much better. But as a presidential debate that actually hit on policy, I thought he did better. He did better here. Trump is funny to me. Like I think he's a funny guy, right? So when he'll like there'll be some big policy and he'll just be like, your son's a crack addict or whatever, right? And then sometimes he has such a great grasp of a policy, like on foresting, policy in California, or I forgot what it was yesterday. And yesterday he did more of the policy stuff than I think I've seen him do in a long time. So I just thought it was effective now because I think maybe some voters want to see if he can pull it together, some messaging discipline, some, mature presidential stuff.
I feel like what happened last night, though, was it was very good for Donald Trump, but in ways that he can't quite take credit for. Like the part where he says to Joe, he's like, hey, Joe, you going to ban the oil industry? And for reasons that nobody can understand, Joe was like, yeah, I'm totally going to do that. And here's why and how I'm going to do that. And he like goes on in detail. And while he's doing that, President Trump is like, does everybody hear? Did everybody hear?
That's very interesting. That's very interesting what you're saying. Like another good thing that he does during these debates, I don't think he did it well last time. I think his interrupting wasn't as terrible as everyone claimed, because I think Biden did the same basically. But I do think that he needed to let Biden speak more. I think that's what he was missing there. But anyway, his now I forgot what I was going to say. But anyway,
I do think it's funny that I don't, on principle, like the idea of preventing people from debating each other. So I didn't love the mute button and stuff like that. There is no question that it was to Trump's advantage, because Joe Biden can sound like he's got a better handle of things if he's being interrupted. He can sort of pretend like the reason why he loses track of his thoughts or why it starts to contradict itself is because he's being or you can ignore that because he's being interrupted. By not being interrupted, he would give these long, they seemed long, they were only 2-minute answers, and it wouldn't, it just didn't go so well for him. So I do think,
wasn't Biden the one who kept, during the primary debates, he kept going, my time is up, I have nothing left to say? Like, I've never seen a politician do that. I quickly wanted to point out what I was going to say was that Trump does a good job of posing the questions that moderators won't pose to Biden. And I think that's actually something he should do more of, and Republicans should do more of. Ignore the question and just ask the guy that, whoever you're debating, the question that the moderator won't ask.
Okay, it couldn't, okay, before I put my own spin on it, but what did you think of the moderator's performance?
I didn't think it was as great as everyone else did, because especially the way she framed a few questions, and especially of those, the one where she said that this Supreme Court fight was over Obamacare. I mean, that's begging the question. It's essentially making the argument for the Democrats. Now, sometimes I feel like they're so immersed in being leftists that they don't even know they're doing it. And that's possibly true. But I just don't understand why they can't find a single moderator who doesn't have some connection to Democrats. Is there not a single person out there who hasn't in some way sort of compromised themselves on this? So I thought she was better than Chris Wallace, which I don't know if you can talk about, but I don't think she was as great as everyone said.
I totally share your exhaustion with how journalists adopt leftist assumptions and build them into their questions. I cannot stand that, actually. And there was certainly plenty of that last night. And there was also unnecessary interruptions. Like, it's okay to have the two people running for president go after each other a little bit. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. We're all adults. We can handle it. And I hate it when people act like you have to keep a debate from breaking out at a debate. But having said that, I actually thought that many of her questions were phrased in such a way as to get a really good, genuine response from each side that let the American voter say, okay, I see that's where Donald Trump is going. I see this is what Joe Biden says. I prefer this one or the other. And she even did that on coronavirus. Well, I don't know how much of it was her questioning, but she didn't get in the way too much. And at the end of that exchange, and I think people were genuinely shocked that Trump kind of won that round, but I'm not even saying it on that level. You really got a vision for Joe Biden wanting to lock it down, wanting to ban children from school, and why he thought that was important, versus Trump being like, yeah, it's bad, but we got to move on. And you can imagine people having problems with either of those, or people liking either of those, but you really saw that difference. And I thought, this is very good to see the winter of our discontent, or whatever. What was the phrase that Joe Biden said? We were headed into
Darker times or something.
very dark winter, or something like that. And Trump being like, we got this. We're Americans. We can do this. That was a real difference of visions. And I thought that never, even though I've seen that in their campaign and rhetoric otherwise, I haven't seen it so side by side.
No, I agree with all of that. I was thinking the same thing when I was watching it. I wondered if Americans would be more prone to want a darker vision like that, and sort of, I wouldn't call it panic, but sort of a little bit of panic, or the let's move forward vision. And maybe that's already built in with both parties. I don't know how it works out, but it was definitely the different view future, I think, was important. And yeah.
Did you catch that one thing where Joe Biden said, "Where does this guy come from?" And he kept saying it, and Donald Trump was like, "Queens."
I'm from Queens. I say China the same way he says China.
So does my husband, but I think just because Donald Trump taught him to do that way. But okay. So anything else from the debate that you thought you mentioned the Hunter Biden scandal and Donald Trump not doing a good job of explaining it, in your view?
Well, here's the problem. No one knows a lot of people don't know what it's about, because there's been a blackout by the press. Blackout by the press. So it's difficult to explain it, because they don't have any, maybe, underlying understanding of the whole problem there. They're just like, oh, there's this crack addicted kid, and he's done some bad things, when really it's about Joe Biden. And he did say that, but I'm not sure he explained exactly how it was about Joe Biden. He just kept saying, you're taking money. Now, listen, Trump is probably, he knows what he's doing in that regard, in the sense of, maybe you don't need to be too specific about this. Maybe you just need to smear him as some kind of, not smear him, because he actually probably did take money, probably. So just, let people know there's something there, and let them find out themselves.
Right. I think it's worth talking a little bit about the specifics of the Hunter Biden, Joe Biden issue. But I want to just take a step back and say that I was surprised to see so many, like, conservative or right of center pundits or elected officials saying that they didn't think Donald Trump should even talk about it, which is showing a surprising, or maybe not so surprising, lack of understanding about how campaigns work. So Donald Trump is actually doing very well in terms of his voter enthusiasm, in terms of his favorability ratings. Like, they're as good as they've been. And considering what he's gone through in terms of negative media coverage this year, it's really stunning how high his favorables are. The one area that is very different from 2016, and I think it's reflected in the polls, is that unlike Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden has had very high favorables. And the number one issue he's running on is that he's this guy of impeccable character, and that's why you should vote for him. He doesn't really paint like too much of a vision of what he would do, except for return to the Obama era policies, except sometimes he wouldn't. It's a very kind of confused policy message. It's all based on character. And you heard that last night in the debate. He's like, I'm the guy with good character. This guy is not. So having an issue of Joe Biden lying about whether he ever discussed Hunter Biden's business deals, or lying about how those business deals were based on him and his power, that speaks directly to his character in a way that affects everybody. If you're making deals with China, and therefore you don't want to go hard against China, and therefore, he's said for years, like, China's not a problem, they're great. And his family's personally benefiting from China, but maybe the country isn't. This is like not a difficult, it's not difficult to understand why the Trump campaign wants to exploit that. And it also has campaign, benefits of just driving down Biden's favorables. So I think it is a very difficult topic to talk about, but why Trump or his people want to talk about it is not surprising at all. Why journalists don't want to talk about it is another issue entirely. You've written a bit about that. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, of course, the Trump campaign wants to talk about it. It is a real story, and there is something there. Now, if it was so easy to, if Joe Biden could easily dispel all these rumors, he would, but he hasn't. Even yesterday, the 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 answers that the campaign gave, it's so difficult to like parse this stuff out, but they said he never had stock in any kind of Chinese company. And also, Chris Wallace said there was nothing there. Like, that is not an answer. Like, yeah, maybe Chris Wallace says nothing's there, but did you ever benefit financially from anything Hunter's done? It's a very easy question to ask, which no one has really asked him. And should be a very easy question to answer.
It's even lower than that. His claim is that he never, ever, ever discussed Hunter's business. So if you have all these, and I think this is where it gets a little complicated. You have Hunter Biden's laptop that was left at the Delaware Mac shop, allegedly. You have a former business partner who has handed over his emails to an investigative journalist. And then you have this whistleblower who came out yesterday who has texts and emails and corporate documents showing Joe Biden's involvement in their affairs. And so of the things they show, these texts show Hunter Biden's business associate saying, remember, don't ever like put it down in writing that Joe's involved. You save that for the face-to-face meetings. So when journalists say, well, there's no evidence in written documents that Joe Biden is involved, it's like, well, right, that confirms what the whistleblower is saying. That's like evidence in support of what the whistleblower is saying, or it could be evidence in support of what the whistleblower is saying. And then likewise, you have these actual emails between the partners saying, Hunter will hold Joe's 10% stake. So if Hunter is holding the money for Joe, again, this might not be something that is reflected on your tax filings. Oh, hey, by the way, I have 10% in this company. And then further beyond that, this was all about an attempted deal that was attempted to be made through a particular corporation. And the whole reason the whistleblower is blowing the whistle is because he thought that deal fell through. But when the Johnson committee, the Senate committee, came out with their documents, he realized, oh no, the deal happened. My company was just cut out of it. They put the money straight into a more directly controlled by the Biden family corporation. So there's like a billion times more to go on here with this story in terms of complicated foreign entanglements of the Biden family than there ever was, like on the best day of the Trump-Russia scandal. And it didn't matter how remote and obscure and weird and tangential and unsourced a claim was about the Trump-Russia thing. The media went crazy with it. And now you have like an actual dude who's an actual Navy veteran, who is a real person who has like real business relationships and real documents saying, Joe Biden's lying. And everyone's like, I don't see a news story here. Does anyone see it? I don't see what could possibly be newsworthy. It's amazing.
I love when they say it hasn't been verified. Like, isn't that your job to verify it? Like, that's what you're supposed to do. The standard of evidence here is far higher than any Russiagate story that was ever written. And this is not an exaggeration. It has more corroboration than the Atlantic story where, Trump was supposedly saying all this stuff about soldiers, which is repeated as fact all the time, never fact checked, just repeated. The idea, like now you have an on the source person who is there. You have emails that were obtained using completely ethical journalistic methods that would be used by any real journalist, and yet we know what's going on. So they think this is going to be. They're nervous that this is going to be a Hillary redux from her email thing, and this is actually probably. I wouldn't say it's worse because I think Hillary actually was, engaged in criminal behavior and probably belonged in prison. But I'm not sure that Biden does, but it's definitely corrupt behavior if true. But we don't know if it's true because no one will investigate or even ask him a simple question.
It's really amazing. And then we're just talking about journalists, but there was also a massive role played here by large tech corporations. I know you're a huge fan of them and that you used to make fun of me for thinking that they were a threat to freedom in some way. But I'm wondering if your view has softened even slightly as a result of how they behaved like totalitarian thugs in suppressing this story.
I feel like that's begging the question. I would say I would say that yes, I have changed my mind a little bit, though I think you're completely misrepresenting my original position. Um, Obviously, these are powerful corporations and they can engage in a liberal behavior just like anyone else. The problem is, I'm not sure that getting government involved and empowering government to lord over their decisions is a good idea for anyone, A, who cares about, freedom in general, but moreover, conservatives who think that that power won't immediately be utilized by liberals when they come into power. And that's what I'm concerned about. I think that just generally with newspapers, with tech companies, conservatives need to start building their own infrastructure, their own newspapers, their own tech companies, because this is getting worse and worse, and it's not going to change. We don't have newspapers; we just have activists working at like Democratic campaign sites. So,
do you know that libertarian meme of "What about roads"?
What about roads now?
Have you ever seen this? Like, it's sort of a. I feel like I can't do a good job of articulating it. Sort of a joke about how if how libertarians are always talking about the need to do everything voluntarily, and at some point someone brings up like, well, what about roads? And it's mocked because it's sort of like an unserious response to libertarianism. But I feel like build your own Facebook is also kind of an unserious response.
That's interesting. Like, here's the thing.
I like it. I like it intellectually. It just seems kind of absurd.
But here's the thing. I mean, in the end, you're not going to be, if you take away liability protections, let's say, and you're going to basically destroy Twitter, probably, right, and maybe Facebook. I don't know that helps conservatives. If Donald Trump didn't have Twitter, I don't know that he'd be president.
Yeah. Okay.
No, go on. I mean, I think that Twitter is a joke, and it is unfair the way they treat conservatives, and it is censorship in a way. And censorship doesn't have to be the government, but I also don't know that the alternative is a better situation for conservatives. So when I say build your own institutions, I don't think that that's too crazy. So, I mean, I think it's a long shot, and I think it would take a long time. But you don't even have you don't even have the news side of the Wall Street Journal on your side, basically, right? I mean, I don't think it's as terrible as people say, but you have the New York Post is basically the only big outlet doing reporting right now. So what are you going to do in the future?
First of all, I want to say there was some Twitter spin about the Wall Street Journal's news story and how it differed from its opinion story. So Kimberly Strassel, who's an excellent reporter for the opinion side, kind of laid out in the easiest to understand way why this Hunter Biden, James Biden, Joe Biden story is a story. And it was very accurately reported and written. And then separately, the news side did something saying that they couldn't, that kind of saying similar stuff and writing up about this whistleblower, but saying that the corporate documents didn't show Joe Biden having any role. They should have mentioned the text saying that they were explicitly trying to hide Joe's role, and they should have mentioned that in the piece. But it wasn't like it refuted the excellent Wall Street Journal opinion page reporting, and it also wasn't like particularly great for Joe. On Twitter, everybody tried to like spin it as, "Oh, this exonerates Joe." Absolutely not, and I don't think
I agree with everybody. Yeah,
it's not a fair reading of the.
No, that story was just a professionally well done, straightforward news.
No, they left out.
Oh, yeah. Okay, but compared to what you usually get, or what I read in the New York Times the other day, where I was learning about, instead of learning about Biden, I was learning about Donald Trump's, old Chinese bank account, et cetera, things like that. So, I mean, I agree. I'm just saying that the Wall Street Journal news pages are not conservative in any way, or any more conservative than many other big newspapers. I'm just saying that I mean, and there's the Examiner and others do a good job, but I'm just saying that in the end, you've lost these institutions like, schools and newspapers. I fear that in the future you lose more and more power to even make an argument, and I worry about that.
Yeah. Okay. I think that you should write a little bit more on it, and then we should discuss again and have a debate just about this. And I should write more about it.
Okay.
Okay. So, David, I saw on Twitter the other night that you were recommending some like horrifically boring sounding show about like repair of antique things or something.
Yeah,
What was this show?
it's fantastic. I urge everyone to watch it. It's incredibly boring, but really fun to sort of chill out to. Right? You have a British like farm or something near, I don't know where it is. It looks like it's in the same field that they use for the Great British Baking Show.
I do
Oh, you
like
like
that
that
show.
show? It's very
Mhm.
similar. And
Oh,
people,
okay.
yeah, in a way, it has like the same music and feel. Like, I just want to talk about the British Baking Show for a minute. It's like, the only thing I dislike about that show is that I have no one to root against. Like on American shows, they're always like making villains and, sort of pitting people against each other. But there you're like rooting for everyone. It gets a little annoying. But so in this show, people bring like, so let's say you had some trinket from your grandmother or great grandmother that was left in your family, but it's broken, like a little fire truck or something. And you bring it to these people and they like fix it, stained glass. It's called repair shop, and it's, or instruments, things like that. I think it's nice. It's a good show.